There are moments in life that change everything. For Lena, it wasn't a loud, explosive event or a moment of confrontation. No, it was the silent, unseen moments that built up like a storm, slow, steady, and inevitable. The whispers, the laughter, the cold, unnoticed stares. It wasn't a single thing that pushed Lena to the edge, but a thousand small, sharp cuts that no one else saw, each one leaving a scar that only she could feel. She had always been quiet, the kind of girl who didn't need to speak to make her presence known. Her thoughts were loud enough in her head, the noise of the world didn't need to add to it. Lena found peace in her books, in her quiet corner of the classroom, in her imagination. The world outside, the one full of flashy smiles, boisterous personalities, and relentless noise, was never where she felt most at home. But in this world, silence is a weakness. Silence is a target. And soon, Lena learned that silence was not just the absence of words, it was an invitation. It all started in the small ways that bullies find their power. Lena never wore the right clothes, the right shoes, or the right makeup. She didn't have the right attitude, the right way of speaking, or the right kind of friends, but she had always kept her head down, focused on the things that mattered to her. But to the others, to Vanessa and her group, Lena's quietness was like a signal, a sign that she was an easy target. They started with the smallest of things, a whispered joke here, a pointed stare there. At first, Lena thought it was harmless, just the usual, typical teasing that everyone had to endure. But it wasn't harmless. It never was. The comments grew bolder, louder, until they weren't whispers at all. They became something else, something malicious. Vanessa, the self-proclaimed queen of the school, was the mastermind behind it all. She would make cruel remarks about Lena's clothes, about her books, about the way she held herself. And every time Vanessa laughed, the rest of the group followed suit, eager to be included in the humor. But Lena didn't retaliate. She didn't yell, she didn't cry. She simply took it. After all, wasn't silence supposed to be golden? It wasn't. Silence was just a cage, a prison built of words she never spoke, but that the world still heard. The first time it really hurt, the first time it really stung, wasn't even about her. It was about her father. Lena had overheard a conversation in the hall between Vanessa and one of her friends. They were talking about how Lena's father was a mechanic, how they thought it was so funny that a girl like her had such an embarrassing parent. And as they laughed, Lena felt it, a hollow, aching emptiness that seemed to spread from her heart to the tips of her fingers. She was ashamed of nothing, but the way they took something that should have been a source of pride and twisted it into something ugly made her feel smaller than she had ever felt before. The bullying wasn't always verbal. There were the pranks, the food that was thrown in her locker, the notes that were slipped under her door with cruel words written in thick black ink. The way they'd take her books, her things, and hide them just to see how long it would take for her to break. But it was the silence that hurt the most, the way everyone pretended not to notice, the way no one spoke up, no one stood up for her, as though she wasn't worth defending. And Lena? She kept her head down, pretending it didn't matter, because if she didn't acknowledge it, maybe it would go away. But it didn't. As the weeks passed, the bullying became routine. Vanessa would make her usual remarks in class, followed by the laugh of her friends, as though it was all part of a script they had memorized. But something began to change in Lena. With every cruel word, with every laugh at her expense, a flicker of something new began to grow. It wasn't anger, not at first. No, it was something deeper, something quieter, something that made her realize she wasn't helpless. She wasn't weak. She wasn't invisible. It was a sense of power, a power she had never known she had, buried deep inside her, waiting to be unleashed. It was the quietest moments that held the most weight. The times when Lena would walk through the hallways, her heart racing, her mind spinning with words she wanted to say, but never did. The moments when she would sit at the back of the classroom, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of her bullies, her hands gripping the edge of her desk, fighting the urge to do something, anything. She didn't know what that something would look like, but she knew it was coming. She could feel it. The storm inside her, growing stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, everything changed. It was in the library of all places. Lena had been spending more time there recently, trying to escape the noise of the world outside. She was sitting at a table in the back, her nose buried in her favorite novel, when she heard the unmistakable sound of laughter. It wasn't a friendly laugh, not a joyous one. No, it was the kind of laugh that made her skin crawl, the kind of laugh that you knew was meant to make someone feel small. Lena didn't need to look up to know who it was. She knew that voice all too well. Vanessa. Lena could hear her. But she didn't turn around. She had learned long ago that if she pretended not to hear it, maybe it would stop. But today, something was different. As the laughter continued, something in Lena snapped. She wasn't sure what it was. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a rush of something fierce, something strong. She heard Vanessa's voice again, this time loud enough for Lena to catch every word. "She's such a loser," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I can't believe she still thinks she has a chance. I'm going to ruin her for good." That was it, the last straw. For the first time in years, Lena stood up, not out of fear, not out of anger, but out of a quiet, determined sense of purpose. She wasn't going to let this continue. She wasn't going to be their punching bag anymore. As Lena walked away from the library, she wasn't just walking to her next class. No, she was walking away from everything she had been. She was walking into something new. A version of herself that no one, especially not Vanessa and her friends, would ever expect. And as she stepped out into the hallway, her mind was clear. It was time to end this. Lena had been silent for too long, and now she was ready to make them listen. 1 week later, everything had changed. Lena walked into school with a quiet confidence that radiated from her like an invisible force field. She wasn't the timid, withdrawn girl she used to be. She wasn't the one who flinched at every unkind word, who shrank when someone laughed. No, today, the silent storm inside her had been unleashed. She moved with purpose, her head held high, her posture strong, and her gaze piercing. The power she had long kept buried within was now visible in every step, in every glance, in the way she carried herself. Gone was the shy, unnoticed girl. In her place was someone who had learned how to control her own destiny. Vanessa and her clique didn't notice at first. They were too caught up in their own small, perfect world, where they ruled everything. They continued with their routine of laughter, insults, and petty tricks. But what they didn't realize was that the quiet girl they had once mocked was no longer a victim. She had become something far more dangerous, a silent force they couldn't predict, let alone control. Lena's transformation was subtle. It wasn't something loud or dramatic. It was in the small moments, the careful, calculated moves she made. She began by walking past Vanessa and her friends with the smallest of smiles, the kind that said, "I know something you don't." Her smile was nothing but a flicker, but her eyes? Her eyes were a different story. They were sharp, laser-focused, taking in every detail of the world around her. Every glance, every laugh, every snicker, Lena saw it all. And she was keeping score. The first blow came in the form of a class project. Vanessa, as always, had assumed that she would lead the project group, as she always did. She was the queen of their social circle, and everything she touched turned to gold. Or so she thought. Lena, however, had a different plan. Without anyone noticing, she subtly shifted the group assignments, ensuring that Vanessa would end up in a team with the most difficult personalities and the least cooperation. It was a small move, one that wouldn't raise any suspicion at first, but it would start to unravel the illusion that Vanessa had worked so hard to maintain. As the weeks passed, it became clear that the project was a disaster. Vanessa, the leader, couldn't pull her group together. She couldn't manage the chaos she had been handed, and it showed. The presentation was a mess. Vanessa, once the flawless star in every group, now found herself struggling to maintain control, and her perfect image began to crack. The whispers started. People began to notice. Why was Vanessa so disorganized? Why wasn't she leading the group like she always did? Vanessa's friends, the ones who had once supported her blindly, were starting to question her abilities. It was the beginning of the end. But Lena wasn't done yet. Next, Lena took her quiet war to the social media battlefield. She didn't post anything herself. She didn't need to. Instead, she planted the seeds of doubt. A well-timed comment here, an innocuous tag there. She posted a few pictures with subtle messages, ones that didn't seem like anything at first glance, but were enough to get people talking. People began to ask questions. They started wondering if the image of perfection Vanessa had always presented was actually just that, an image. Was she really as perfect as she made herself out to be? Why was she acting so strange lately? Lena didn't need to do anything more than let the doubt simmer. It spread like wildfire. People began to look at Vanessa with new eyes, and the more they did, the more cracks began to show. Her carefully crafted world began to crumble, piece by piece, all because Lena had decided to sit back and let the power of silence do the talking. But the real game changer came during the school's annual talent show. Vanessa had always been the star of the show. Every year, she was the center of attention, the one everyone talked about. She was the one who got all the applause, all the admiration. No one dared to challenge her, until now. Lena wasn't interested in performing herself, but she knew how to shift the spotlight. She engineered the perfect situation that would make Vanessa look foolish on stage. Vanessa, in all her arrogance, was convinced she would be the star once again. She rehearsed her performance, sure that this year would be no different than the others. But Lena had other plans. Through a series of carefully placed, quiet interventions, she ensured that Vanessa's performance would falter. A miscue, a malfunctioning microphone, a wardrobe mishap. The crowd, once enamored with Vanessa, now found themselves watching in silence as the queen of the school faltered. The applause, once loud and enthusiastic, was now replaced by awkward silence, murmurs, and the sound of people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. As Vanessa stood on stage, her face flushed with embarrassment, Lena couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about balance. It was about showing the world that power wasn't always loud. Sometimes the strongest force in the room was the one who stayed silent, who bided their time and waited for the right moment to strike. The aftermath was swift. Vanessa's perfect image shattered. The whispers turned into full-blown rumors. Her friends started distancing themselves, one by one. They didn't know what had happened, but they knew something had changed. Vanessa was no longer the center of attention. The girl, who had once been untouchable, was now on the outside, begging for forgiveness from the very people she had once humiliated. And Lena? She didn't gloat. She didn't stand over Vanessa's fallen throne and laugh. No, Lena simply moved on, calm and composed, her silence a testament to the power she now wielded. She had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Sometimes it's the quietest moments that hold the most power. Vanessa and her friends didn't understand what had happened. They had underestimated the quiet girl. They had believed that silence was a weakness. But they were wrong. In the end, Lena didn't need to raise her voice or shout to make a point. She had let the storm inside her build quietly, and when it was time, she let it break. The world had watched, and now they understood. Lena's silence had been her greatest weapon, and it had made all the difference. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more thrilling tales of revenge, transformation, and quiet strength, make sure to subscribe to Expect Stories for more captivating content. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest updates. Join the journey and share your thoughts with us in the comments. We love hearing from you.